Good evening and welcome everyone to IAedChat Live. We are continuing to bring you the latest educational news each month, and we're pleased to be able to connect with you tonight. We have two very special guests joining us. Greg Deutmeyer and Jenny Hillebrand are here to chat with us, and we will introduce them in just a couple of minutes. As you can see, tonight's chat will have a live video stream, and we will be taking questions from our audience. Please submit your questions via our hashtag on Twitter, which is hashtag IAedChat. We will monitor this feed, so please do not hesitate to share your thoughts. We will also get this show on our podcast later tonight. If you have not checked us out on Apple Podcasts, on Podomatic, Spotify, or the Google Play Market, do so. Subscribe, give us a rating, and we really appreciate your engagement on that platform and also your feedback. We are going to start with some introductions, and I will begin. My name is Dan Butler, and I'm an elementary principal at Epworth Elementary School in the Western Dubuque School District. And I'm going to pass it over to Andrea Townsley.
Hey everybody, my name is Andrea Townsley. I am a former fourth grade teacher, and I've been an instructional coach, and I am now currently a school improvement consultant at Grantwood AEA in and around Cedar Rapids.
And good evening, everybody. I'm Nick Duffy, principal of Jackson Elementary in Cedar Rapids. Prior to that, I taught middle and high school language arts and thoroughly enjoyed that before jumping into elementary administration. So that wraps up our team. And now we get to introduce our guests for this evening. Greg Deutmeyer serves as the instructional coach at Epworth Elementary in Epworth, Iowa. The Det Nation, his family, includes his wife, Christy, and their 5 kids, Hannah, Caleb, Isaac, Lydia, and Leah. In his free time, Greg enjoys hanging out with his family, learning about anything unique or history-related, building things, grilling, and an occasional round of golf. Jenny Hillebrand serves as the instructional coach at Dyersville Elementary in Dyersville, Iowa. Her family includes her husband, Jason, and 3 beautiful daughters. In her free time, she enjoys spending lots of time with her family and friends, shuttling her kids to and from their sporting events, walking, golfing, and playing a friendly game of euchre. So welcome to both Greg and Jenny. We are so pleased to have you with us tonight on IAedChat Live. We're going to start by having you tell us about yourselves and your experiences in education beyond the brief introduction there.
You bet, Nick. So I am Greg, and like you said, I currently serve as an instructional coach at Epworth Elementary. This is my 4th year here, and prior to this, I had the opportunity to be an IC at Cascade and Bernard Elementary, and prior to that, I did 6 years as special ed at Cascade Elementary at a K-6 building.
And yeah, like you said, I'm Jenny Hillebrand, and I am the instructional coach at Dyersville Elementary in the Western Dubuque District. I am in my 18th year in education. I was a preschool teacher for 11 years, and then I went to 1st grade, and most recently have been an instructional coach for the last 4 years. So it's been a good run.
So I know you guys pretty well, and I know a lot about your passions in education, but this is not about me tonight. This is about our followers and our audience that we have with us. But I don't really care who starts with this, but talk to us about your passions in your passions in education, and then what are the things that really drive you to do what you do?
All right. I think my biggest passion is just being there for the kids and making sure that kids are getting the best education that they can, and also just becoming the best people that they can as they go through elementary school. Through that, now as an instructional coach, it's been awesome to really focus on the instruction that students are getting, but also working with teachers on just things that happen within the classroom, how we work on growth mindset with kids now, how we are constantly talking to kids about becoming the best versions of themselves, both with mindset and with curriculum and instruction. So being an instructional coach, it's been awesome to have both of those roles and to see kids really, really become better versions of themselves.
Kind of piggyback off that then, Dan, I've always said, like, in my mind, our school districts, especially like in a small town like we have in Western Dubuque or where I've always been, like, the school is kind of the hope for the future, I always see. So, like, I just get fired up, like, thinking that we have the opportunity to hang out with kids, and it's even better when we get the opportunity to help them in things that are going to help them succeed later on in life. So one of the things that really drives me is technology and getting that into kids' hands in an applicable way where it's not just like a fluff project, but this is something we can really utilize. And I know Jenny talked a little bit about the growth mindset and positivity, which has also been one of those big driving forces for me the last few years, for sure, just going beyond those academics to, developing kids and character that doesn't give up when it faces hardship.
Absolutely. And you've done a remarkable job of weaving those things into your podcast that we're going to talk about quite a bit tonight. And how's that for a setup, Andrea, for the next question? But really looking forward to the conversation tonight. And as we get going with some of the content that we share for the people in the audience, do ask those questions via the hashtag IAedChat on Twitter. We will take those and make sure that we ask them for Greg and Jenny.
That was a pretty great segue, and then you kept talking, Dan. It would have been a great segue without all the jibber. Just kidding. Make sure you send all your questions our way, and we will get those questions asked. So you guys have a podcast that has celebrated a 2-year birthday called the Instructional Coaching Corner. Talk to us about, one, how this podcast was developed, and then also why you decided to start podcasting.
So I just told Greg that I get to start this one, and he looked at me and was like, why?
Probably because it's just going to be a one-word answer.
So a couple of years ago, I am going to start this one. A couple of years ago, I had a phone call come through, and it was Greg, and he said, "Hey, I have this idea, and I want to talk to you about it." And so he pitched the idea of starting a podcast, and so really this has been his baby. He kind of started this, and was the one behind, the mastermind behind all of it, came up with the title and the name. So I am going to give Greg all the credit on this one, but Greg was the one who got us started.
So here's where the whole thing started. 3 years ago, my wife was pregnant with twins, and I was spending a lot of time on the golf course trying to earn extra money for diapers and whatnot. And I stumbled upon a podcast called Stuff You Should Know. And it's basically two guys who do some research, but then share stuff out. And it's not so much about just the stuff they're sharing, but more so like the connection between the two, and then the connection that ends up being created with the listener. So at the end of that summer, after riding around on a golf cart and listening to like hours and hours of this, Dan and I attended a conference in Washington, D.C., and I attended a mini session on podcasting. And I remember driving back in the van. I'm kind of like the John Madden of education. I'm not one to enjoy flying. So I made Dan drive. And on the way back, I was saying, I would love to start a podcast in education that is similar to the demeanor of Stuff You Should Know, where it's not going to be something you're going to have to sit down with a pad of paper and take notes and solely focus on that as you listen, but instead something a little more lighthearted where, at the end of it, you should hopefully get
crossed.
At least a little nugget of information that you can take in some way or another and implement and use. But while maybe cutting your grass or dusting your house or cleaning the bathrooms or going for a walk or whatever it might be. And then I just started thinking like, well, if I want this podcast to go in that way, I need someone to do it with me, because I don't just want to sit there and talk to myself. And kind of leads up to what Jenny had shared with getting a phone call and saying, hey, let's do this.
I definitely have listened to their podcast. So those guys on Stuff You Should Know engage back and forth with each other wonderfully. I'm kind of a true crime junkie, so the one that I listened to a couple of days ago was their rendition of what happened with the Villisca axe murders in Iowa of 1912.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good one. So that's cool that that's where you got your start, that idea.
Well, for those that have listened to a few of your episodes, it's clear that you have a very friendly and funny dynamic together in addition to sharing relevant content and practices. Talk to our viewers about the importance of this dynamic.
So I think what Greg really likes to do, Greg is notorious for asking questions. Usually I don't get to see the lead up for our, I know what the topic is and we have our questions and, things that we're going to talk about, but the introductions, if anybody listens, are always those that Greg just throws off the top of his head. And so usually it ends with a question that I'm never quite sure how to answer. And so Greg likes to throw some of those situations in where I look at him going, I think I know what you want me to say, but really I have no idea. So I think the best part about the podcast is that lots of laughs happen as we're recording. And it's just lighthearted and funny. And I think we've gotten way better at the back and forth conversations. We've listened to some of the older ones a while back.
It's like scripted out.
We did. We had it all scripted and it was this back and forth where now it's simply, here's our topic and we just kind of go with it. So we've gotten a little bit better at that.
And I think that's one of the things that I feel, or at least in my mind and from feedback that we've gotten, is one of those things that sets, not to like diss other podcasts, but like going with a little lighter, with a lighthearted approach where it kind of sets you apart. And it does make it where I've talked to not a lot, but some listeners who it's like, hey, I feel like I'm sitting right there in the room with you guys. And honestly, that's like the best feedback for me, because that's how I feel when I'm engaged to a podcast that I feel like I know the host and I really enjoy listening to. So I think for our podcast, like the dynamic between Jenny and I is crucial. And one of those things that I think was there at the beginning, but it's also gotten a lot better. I feel there's times that we'll stop and we'll hit end record, and it's just like, that right there was classic ICC podcast material. And it was just some rabbit trails, but also some content on guided reading,
I think the best part too, even with some of the things that we've talked about, is we try not to talk about things that are too serious. So even some of the topics that we've done have been more just giving information and allowing teachers or whoever listens to get life lessons from it, not just what you can apply to your classroom or to your school building, but things that, Greg and I bring in a lot of our personal lives and home stories. So I think that is also another dynamic that's kind of fun. We usually get to hear about Greg's 5 kids and his detonation. So his stories are way funnier than mine. He's the comedian of the two.
So this is off the script, and I know this is going to throw Greg a little bit of a curveball, but talk to our viewers. I know, man. We've talked about the lightheartedness and taking maybe more complex concepts and making them friendly, relatable, etc. But talk about some of the content that you have shared within your podcast, because there's been some pretty important stuff that you've dug into over these 2 years. So just give the viewers a little snapshot of some of the stuff they would find on the ICC podcast.
Yeah, you bet. So we started off, we did one of our first ones right off the bat was on leading effective teams, and then moved into video and the power of using video to help the power of video for a teacher to use so that they could see themselves teaching and kind of see what it looks like when they're doing what they do. And then we moved into, I believe it was a 4 or 5 part mindset series. where we talked mindset big picture, but then also moved into mindset activities for the classroom. We've tackled movement in the classroom, different movement activities. One of the big pushes in our district has been the Orange Frog, or the Happiness Advantage, which is pulled from Sean Akers' research, the book called The Happiness Advantage. And we did a 9-part series on that, where we broke down essentially each chapter of that book. And currently, well, over the summer, we did a 2-part series on burnout. We've interviewed several different people, especially those who attend the KPEC conference in Dubuque. We've, for the last 2 years, we've sat down with their lead or keynote speakers. And currently, we are in the midst of a 10-ish part series on guided reading. We're on, I think, just launched part 3 not too long ago. So that would be like the full length episodes. But then we also we do what we call mini casts, and those are kind of like little life lessons. Mm-hmm. And I guess like one that really sticks out to me lately has been one that we titled Fault and Responsibility, and just the idea of, you know, something may happen and it's not my fault, but at the same time, the position I'm in or the relationship with that person, I have a responsibility to try to make that better or to fix that problem. Another one, a mini cast, we talked about, you know, how we react when we're caught off guard. And I think in that one, I actually tell a story of my son acting like he was peeing on dinosaurs in the middle of our hallway. So like we have these moments in life where we're caught off guard, and what do we do in those moments? So yeah, it is lighthearted, but we do tackle a lot of education focused stuff, like what we're doing with our guided reading series now, but also trying to get it out to like the bigger picture of just, you know, being a person who is happy, positive, has a growth mindset, etc. Jenny, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Nope, you took care of that one.
Kind of just rambled. I pulled a Hillebrand there.
Well,
usually that's what Jenny does in the podcast. Just like
when we're talking about guided reading, for sure, and then Jenny just push record and just let her go.
Okay, so, that might be my passion. Yes.
Yeah. So that definitely gives our viewers some context as far as what you guys talk about, because there is some very pretty deep content stuff that you are tackling, whether it is positive psychology, guided reading, mindset, a lot of things that are relevant and hot topics within the educational field. So we're going to get into this podcasting a little bit more here. So what is it about podcasting as a learning tool that was attractive to you when you started determining how to get your thoughts and ideas out there? Greg, you started down that road a little bit earlier, but we'll let you expand on that.
Yeah, so and I don't know if this was one of the driving forces at the time, but looking back, it was certainly there. So I'm a very busy person once I leave school, and it's hard for me to like sit down and read articles or books, etc. at night, just with our family situation. So with having a bunch of little kids always around, but I started realizing like I cut the grass each week, I help clean the house, I fold laundry, I'm doing all this stuff where what could I be doing at those times to learn something? And that's where the idea of like a podcast came in. It's like I could easily pop in some earbuds and listen to a couple different podcasts about whatever I want. I mean, there's so much out there. So as far as a tool for me is to utilize to say like, here's these thoughts I have or that Jenny has, as far as to get them out there, I feel it's just a very friendly format because everyone has commutes and everyone has chores or things they have to do where you could listen, and it's not one of those things, like I said, where you need to sit there and be jotting down notes. It's similar to like listening to the radio.
And I would to piggyback off that, I was always, you know, when I would go out for walks or you know, I'm always running with kids, so they don't always like the podcast on in the car, but you know, for me, when I go out for walks, I'm a huge music lover. So usually it was always listening to music and that. And then after we started podcasting, or even shortly before Greg even approached me, I started listening to a couple of them that were on happiness. And it was funny because listening to those just kind of, it started to shift that mindset. And then the very next year was when our district started going into the Orange Frog Happiness Advantage. So a lot of the things that I was listening to on these podcasts came through with, what the district initiative with our Orange Frog Happiness Advantage. And then Greg coming to me talking about wanting to do the podcast. So it was kind of, for me, it was exciting because I listened to podcasts, never thought that I would actually be a part of one. So yeah, that's kind of where I came in to the podcast, was just listening to those happiness ones. And then realizing that, they just feel good when you're listening to them and the information that you get from them.
And kind of the piggyback off that too, it's one of those platforms where I feel your personality can really come out in it. And I know you can do that with writing too, or blogging. I played around with that probably 3, 4, 5 years ago, and this just seemed like the platform.
This is not on the script, so I'm kind of putting you guys on the spot. I want to have you see if you can just give us a couple of podcasts that you listen to, so we can get those out onto our hashtag to go along with recommending your instructional coaching corner one. And I'm going to just say, I listen to podcasts all the time to and from work because I have a lot of windshield time. And by far, it's my favorite way to learn from other people, because aside from face-to-face, because you can hear voice, you can hear their tone, you can hear laughter, you can hear all of that. And that doesn't always come out in writing. So thank you guys for starting that, because I agree. It's so much different than reading a blog or something like that, because you definitely get to know people's personalities. So I appreciate that. So if you have a couple that you can just recommend to us that you listen to, then I will get those out on our Twitter hashtag.
Well, I think one would be the IAedChat podcast. So there's a plug for you guys. Another one, I listen to the Bedley Brothers a lot. They get some pretty big guests on there, and it's always fun to hear their perspective and not the professionals, but they'd be professionals, but the leaders in their fields coming on and talking about different education topics and so forth. And they're always interviewing people that are kind of like right with the trends of where education is going now and so forth. So it's always interesting. A lot of the times too, I feel like I just end up listening to random things that I find on Twitter, and I don't like subscribe or follow, but I'm like, oh, that title seemed interested, so I listened to it.
Yeah, so I guess a couple that I listened to the Happier with Gretchen Rubin, and it's her and her sister. They have a great, they have the dialogue that I think when Greg and I first started, I would listen to theirs and I'd be like, oh, I want to sound like them. They just have really good back and forth, lots of laughter. One thing Greg and I had to work on, I realized, is that at the very beginning, I was an aggressive agreeer. And when you're listening to podcasts, you can't have that aggressive. I was that aggressive agreeer. And after the first couple I listened to, I'm like, Greg, you have to tell me to stop doing that. So now I just sit there and I nod really big at him like, yes, you're right on. Keep going.
That's when I'm allowed to talk.
Oh, come on now. So that Happier one is just a great one because, again, it's just kind of everyday life lessons, life tips. Another one that I really like that I started and that came from the Happier with Gretchen Rubin, it's called Radical Candor. And this one I like because this one talks a lot about leadership, and it just kind of talks about how it doesn't matter what position you're in. If you're a CEO, if you are a custodian, if you are, like in the education world, if you're a teacher, if you're a paraprofessional, if you're an instructional coach, how no matter what role you're in, you're still a leader in some way. And so they really talk about, the important characteristics of what it takes to be a good leader. And so when I listen to that one, even as an instructional coach, there's things that I can take away that just how I can be a leader within the building as an instructional coach. So that's another one that I really like.
So awesome that we've got some resources to share out with different podcasts that you listen to. And really, that's why you guys are on here tonight, is just because the popularity of podcasts has just grown, from my opinion, within the last 2 to 3 years, for sure. That people, it just seems there's a podcast for just about everything, and people are going to that for a learning tool, because you can listen while you're cutting the grass, or you're cleaning the bathroom, or you're taking your walk, or whatever that happens to be. It's very mobile, very accessible, and great things. But you guys, over the 2 years, you've really developed a pretty professional podcast, and here you are. I don't want to say you're just two instructional coaches at within Western Dubuque, but this is not something that you're making money on. In fact, you're losing money on a yearly basis by doing this for your subscriptions and your equipment and things that you have. But you're two ordinary people putting out a very professional product, and we're going to kind of dig into that as far as like what that looks like. So I'll kick it over to Nick to move forward with us.
Great. Thanks, Dan. So take us behind the scenes. What does it look like to record, edit, and share a podcast?
Yeah.
Greg gets to talk a lot on this one. So just Greg, tell him about it.
So when we first started, we had a single mic, and we're actually using it right now. It's plugged in the USB port. And we quickly realized that we talk at different levels. So we invested in a mixer. So if you come in and we're about the podcast, it looks very like legit. It looks like a little radio studio. There's a mixer, there's cords running everywhere, there's microphones, and they're not just on a stand, they're on an arm boom. So it's like, and you can move it around and put it right where you want it.
Greg usually has to help mine because mine just flaps up and down. So.
So there's a bunch of equipment, but like that's a one-time overhead cost. So yeah, we did that and really helped with the sound. And then that runs into our mixer, runs into my computer, and we use a program called Audacity. And essentially when we record a podcast, we'll hit record, and I'll usually have a sheet of some jumbled notes and the ramblings of a madman. What it looks like. And Jenny's usually shooting from the hip.
Yep.
Sometimes she'll have something, but maybe she studies. I don't know.
I have it all up here, Greg. It's all up here.
And then we just start going. And honestly, there's very little that's cut out.
No, usually when we mess up, we just look at the camera. Usually Greg's like, cut. So
a lot of ums. That's really it. I say a lot, and I say like a lot. And so once we're done, within Audacity, which is again a free software, we do our edits and put our music on the front end and the back end, and then it's ready to share out. When we usually share out on Tuesdays, every other Tuesday is kind of our goal, and we have a platform called Podomatic, which is our housing server for all our episodes and so forth, and then from there it gets shot out to essentially every podcast site, such as like iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. And then we also have stuff linked to our website, which I kind of see, I always call it like our home on the web, where it's kind of that hub where it can take you to all the iTunes, the Google. It can also take you to our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So it seems like a little task, but as I read like where it all goes and stuff, there is a process of getting it out there and editing and so forth. And usually, like if I'm doing good on the edits, it's usually like 2 minutes to every 1 minute of audio. So I can usually, and that includes listening to it, obviously. But then we shoot it out there and then promote it out there through our social media accounts.
We should make it known too that I have offered to help with edits, but Greg's kind of a control freak like that, and usually never lets me near it. So he does do a lot of it, but I have offered.
So I don't know if that answers your question, Nick. But
absolutely.
One of the cool things I know Dan and I have talked a lot about is that Jenny and I wanted to start a podcast, And going into it, like that was the goal. But in the meantime, I almost I had to learn had to research microphones, had to research audio equipment, had to research how to edit, had to research how to build a website, and like all these secondary skills that I got to acquire on the way, which is kind of a little blessing in disguise because it's stuff that I've been carrying over into some of the stuff we're doing here at school as well. So recording is one of the aspects of it, but then there's a whole nother behind the scenes part too.
Yeah, that's and I think one of the points to mention with that is obviously you mentioned a lot of things. You mentioned a lot of things there and how it goes, but as I said when we kind of started this question, anybody can do this, right? I mean, we're talking about two people that, hey, we've got a message we think we want to share. Let's look into this a little bit and let's get a podcast out there. So I think about our followers and our viewers of if you are thinking about starting a podcast or, you know, just engaging and listening and learning in that platform, it's doable, right? And through a little bit of research and some learning, you could start it really tomorrow if you wanted to. And obviously, as you guys have grown and adapted, you've increased your quality, of course, but it's something that can be done. I mean, IAedChat figured out how to drop a podcast. I think anybody can do it, right? So it's good stuff. So thinking about that, as you guys continue to move forward, what's next in terms of podcasting for you? What's on your mind? You talked about a lot more guided reading stuff that you're going to drop content-wise, but as you're thinking about the future, you're 2 years in, what do the next 2 years look like, or even further out?
You know, I think that's the beauty of podcasting is that right now we know that we have a lot of information that's going to come out with guided reading, but I think Greg and I always find we always have books that we're reading or, you know, things that we're working on with teachers that the sky's the limit for what we can talk about. And I think that's the beauty of podcasting is that looking ahead, it could be anything. You know, we talked about guided reading. What about guided math? Guided math, how about how we can, I don't know. I feel like the sky's the limit with what we can talk about.
I have been joking that, so this will be, I think we just released our 56th episode. So eventually I'm waiting for us to get like halfway through recording an episode and be like, I think we did this. But like Jenny said, there is a ton of stuff out there, and we usually were like a month or two planned out. Like our guided reading will take us through January-ish, because that'll be a 10-parter. And then after that, you know, Dan, I really don't know, but we will be doing something for sure.
And I think viewers will ask, we hope that viewers start asking questions, you know, where we can go off of what people want. Like right now, we're going with the things that we're, you know, working really heavily in our own buildings. And so those are kind of the topics that we choose to talk about because it's what we're immersed in right now in our work. But I think going forward too, that if we have listeners that will ask for things, you know, hey, what's your take on this? That we might throw out a podcast on something if Greg and I feel like it's something that we can talk about and share information with them on. So looking to them too.
And then I guess I continue to see us, you know, kind of holding on to our brand where I don't see us. I know a lot of people have asked, like, are you shooting to get bigger and bigger names and guests on the podcast and so forth? And my answer is always no. I feel like the bread and butter is Greg and Jenny. And then throwing in a guest maybe every 6 episodes or so. So.
You're not going to leave me any time to tweet that out, but definitely I will be tweeting that out about the bread and butter being Greg and Jenny. So I look forward to tweeting that out here in a second when I have a minute.
The bread and butter in our little podcast world.
That's not what you said. That's not what you said.
In my little corner of iTunes or Apple Podcast.
I'm going to go ahead and make sure some of your resources are shared. I did throw out your website that has all things Instructional Coaching Corner onto the hashtag, but if we have some viewers that are not on Twitter right now, you can find Greg at Greg Deutmeyer, Deutmeyer. And then you can find Jenny at Hillebrand, Hillebrand, Jenny, Jenny. And then their website that has all of the different options for listening to the podcast, www.iaccpodcast.com. I'm going to go ahead and give it back to you guys for a couple closing thoughts on this Sunday evening.
You guys as in us. Okay. Yeah, I'll let you go.
This is where
it's
we
always
take that deal.
It's always hard without the edit ability when you're live. But I guess I would just encourage anyone who's watching or listening just to, I mean, it doesn't have to be our podcast, but it certainly could be, because cleaning the bathrooms would be a lot more fun with Jenny and Greg talking to you, and maybe you'd learn something too, or mowing the lawn or whatever you're doing. It's a great tool to learn. So if it is our podcast, that'd be awesome. You know, subscribe, listen, share, maybe tell a friend or two, maybe go on iTunes and give us a little star, or not a star, like 5 stars if you think we're worth it. People have so far, so you wouldn't be the first. But yeah.
I know. I appreciate that Greg took me along on this journey, and I tell him this all the time, that this is definitely out of my element. Crazy that I was the drama queen in high school, where I could go up on a stage and I was never nervous performing in front of people. But the first probably 4 or 5 times that we started to record podcast, I was nervous. And he's like, nobody sees you. And I said, I know, but there's just something different about not having that interaction with people to really sell your passion behind things, or, you know, seeing your emotion face to face. So I think that's been probably one of the funnest parts of this, is that just the interactions between Greg and I feel like they've gotten better. And
we've come a long way. I don't know if you remember, like, after we recorded the first one, like, we were scared to like submit it because we didn't know what people would think, and it was really long too.
Wasn't it like 45 minutes?
It was. Yeah.
It was a long one. We've shortened them now. They're only like 20 or 25 minutes. So, but no, it's been a lot of fun, and the feedback that we've gotten has been really positive. So that also makes it encouraging to keep going.
That's awesome, guys. And thanks so much for being here. I'm going to wrap up our show here with a couple of upcoming regional national events, which there aren't any right now that we have on the docket. So we do want to tell our viewers, if there are some things, local, regional, national events that you would like us to highlight and share out, please reach out to us, send us a link, and we will make sure that we give those a shout out and push those events out. And we'll close things up. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us and sharing your thoughts on IAedChat Live. Always the last Sunday of the month, and it's always great learning with all of you. Want to let our viewers know that we will be off from the live chat circuit in November and December due to Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. So we will be back in 2019 with a whole new slate of IAedChat Lives the last Sunday of the month. Very special thank you to our guests tonight, Greg Deutmeyer and Jenny Hillebrand. And on behalf of Nick, Andrea, and myself, want to thank everybody for joining us. Be sure to follow some of the new friends you met tonight on the hashtag IAedChat Live. Continue to follow that hashtag and continue the conversation throughout the week. You can also find a great deal of resources on our website, which is tinyurl.com/IAedChat. We are going to be back next week with another great topic. And until that time, be the change. Good night, everybody.